What if the world you know, your reality, was nothing more than a fragile veil, stitched together by the threads of your perception? And what if that veil began to tear? Welcome to a deep dive into the Tome of Shattered Veils, a psychological descent into a broken reality, an original horror novel concept that explores the unraveling of existence through the lens of psychological horror. This is not just a story about fear. It's a journey into the fragility of consciousness, the terror of questioning what's real, and the haunting realization that reality itself might be a lie. Tonight, we're peeling back the layers of this unsettling narrative, diving into its psychological depths, its mechanics of broken perception, and the existential dread that defines it. We'll explore how the Tome of Shattered Veils forces us to confront the limits of our minds and the horrors that lurk when those limits collapse. If you're a fan of psychological horror games like Silent Hill or dark fiction like House of Leaves, this is for you. So, grab a seat, dim the lights, and let's descend into a reality that's starting to fracture. But before we begin, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. This channel is your home for deep dive horror analysis, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Ready? Let's open the tome. The Tome of Shattered Veils isn't just a story, it's a psychological labyrinth. To understand its terror, we need to meet our protagonist, unravel the mechanics of a fracturing reality, and explore the psychological horror that drives this descent. Let's start with the story's foundation, a world on the brink of collapse, seen through the eyes of someone who's about to lose everything they thought they knew. Meet Elliot Kane, a reclusive archivist who spends his days cataloging forgotten manuscripts in a decaying library. Elliot is not your typical horror protagonist. He's not a hero, not a detective, not a chosen one. He's an ordinary man, haunted by a quiet life of routine and repressed trauma. But Elliot's world is about to change when he discovers an ancient book, the Tome of Shattered Veils, hidden in the library's deepest vault. This book isn't just a plot device, it's the catalyst for the story's central horror, the fracturing of reality itself. As Elliot reads, he notices subtle inconsistencies in his world. Objects shift when he's not looking. Conversations loop in ways that don't make sense. Time feels wrong. The tome doesn't just tell a story, it rewrites the rules of existence, and Elliot is caught in the crossfire. Reality fracturing in the Tome of Shattered Veils isn't your standard cosmic horror trope of eldritch gods or interdimensional rifts. It's deeply psychological, rooted in the idea that perception defines reality. When Elliot reads the tome, it doesn't summon monsters. It destabilizes his ability to trust what he sees, hears, and feels. Imagine waking up one day and noticing that your reflection blinks before you do. Or hearing your own voice echo words you never said. That's the kind of horror we're talking about. This concept draws heavily from psychological phenomena like dissociation and derealization, where the mind detaches from reality as a defense mechanism. For Elliot, these aren't just symptoms, they're the story's mechanics. The tome amplifies his latent trauma, forcing him to question whether the cracks in his reality are external or a projection of his fracturing mind. This ambiguity is what makes the story so unsettling. Is the world breaking, or is Elliot? To ground this, let's compare it to other media. Think of Silent Hill 2, where the town reflects James Sunderland's guilt and trauma, or The Matrix, where reality is a constructed illusion. The Tome of Shattered Veils takes this further by making the fracturing a personal, intimate experience. It's not about a grand conspiracy or a supernatural force, it's about one man's descent into a reality that no longer holds together. To understand Elliot's journey, we need to understand his mind. Elliot is defined by his obsessive need for order. As an archivist, he finds comfort in categorizing, labeling, and preserving. But this obsession hides a deeper wound. The loss of his younger sister, Clara, who vanished when he was a teenager. This trauma is the key to the tome's power over him. The book doesn't just show him a broken reality, it forces him to confront the parts of his psyche he's buried. Psychologically, Elliot exhibits traits of dissociation, a coping mechanism where the mind distances itself from overwhelming emotions. The tome weaponizes this, turning his dissociation into a literal unraveling of reality. As he reads, he experiences cognitive distortions, his memories shift, his perception of time warps, and he begins to doubt his own identity. This is where the horror lies, not in jump scares, but in the slow erosion of self. Have you ever had a moment where you questioned what was real? Maybe a dream felt too vivid, or a memory didn't quite add up. That's the feeling the Tome of Shattered Veils captures, but amplified to a terrifying degree. Drop a comment below if you've ever experienced something like this. It's a universal fear we'll explore more as we go. We've established Eliot's world and the tome's effect on his reality. But how does this fracturing manifest? What makes this story a masterpiece of psychological horror? Let's dive into the mechanics of broken perception and how they create a narrative that's as unsettling as it is profound. At its core, the Tome of Shattered Veils is about perception. Or, more accurately, the breakdown of perception. The tome doesn't just alter Eliot's reality, it alters how he processes it. To understand this, we need to explore the psychological mechanisms that underpin the story's horror: dissociation, reality testing, and the fragmentation of consciousness. Dissociation is a psychological state where a person feels disconnected from their thoughts, body, or reality. Derealization, a subset of this, makes the world feel unreal, like a dream or a simulation. In the Tome of Shattered Veils, these aren't just mental states, they're the rules of the narrative. As Eliot reads the tome, he experiences moments where his surroundings feel artificial. A chair might seem too perfect, like a prop in a play. A conversation might feel scripted, with people repeating phrases in unnatural ways. This isn't supernatural. It's psychological horror rooted in the mind's fragility. To illustrate, let's look at a scene from the novel. Early on, Eliot is cataloging books when he notices a colleague, Sarah, staring at him. Her face is blank, her eyes unblinking. When he speaks to her, she responds with the same sentence, over and over, "It's in the book, Eliot. It's always been in the book." The repetition isn't just eerie. It's a symptom of Eliot's derealization, where his mind is struggling to process a coherent reality. This moment draws from real psychological experiences. Derealization often occurs in response to trauma or stress, and for Eliot, the tome amplifies his unresolved grief over Clara's disappearance. The book becomes a mirror, reflecting his fractured psyche back at him. This is what sets the Tome of Shattered Veils apart from traditional horror. It's not about external threats, but internal collapse. Reality testing is the mind's ability to distinguish what's real from what's not. In a healthy mind, this process is automatic. You see a chair, you know it's a chair. But for Eliot, the tome disrupts this. Objects change shape when he looks away. Sounds don't match their sources. His memories contradict each other. This is where cognitive distortions come in. Patterns of thinking that skew perception, like assuming a neutral event is threatening or misinterpreting sensory input. In one chilling scene, Eliot walks through his apartment, only to find it subtly wrong. The walls are slightly too far apart. His reflection in the mirror shows him smiling, even though he's not. These distortions aren't random, they're tied to his trauma. The tome uses his memories of Clara to rewrite his reality, making him question whether she ever existed or if he's the one who's fading. This draws parallels to psychological horror games like Layers of Fear, where the environment shifts to reflect the protagonist's mental state. But the Tome of Shattered Veils goes deeper by making the distortions personal. Every crack in Eliot's reality is a reflection of his guilt, his fear of losing control, and his desperate need to understand what happened to Clara. The most terrifying aspect of the Tome of Shattered Veils is its exploration of consciousness fragmentation. As Eliot's reality fractures, so does his sense of self. He begins to experience moments where he's not sure who he is. In one scene, he finds a journal in his handwriting, but the entries describe events he doesn't remember. In another, he hears his own voice narrating his actions from outside his body. This is the ultimate psychological horror, the fear that you are no longer you. This concept ties to philosophical questions about consciousness. What makes you you? Is it your memories? Your perception? Your body? The Tome of Shattered Veils suggests that when these elements are disrupted, the self begins to unravel. For Eliot, the tome is a catalyst for this unraveling, forcing him to confront the possibility that his reality, and his identity, were never as stable as he thought. This idea of a fracturing self is something we see in horror all the time, think of Identity or Black Swan. But what makes the Tome of Shattered Veils unique is how it ties this to the act of reading. The tome isn't just a book, it's a metaphor for how stories, especially horror stories, can reshape our understanding of ourselves. If you're loving this analysis, smash that like button and share your thoughts in the comments. What's the scariest moment of reality distortion you've encountered in horror? We've explored how the tome fractures Elliot's perception and consciousness. But what about the broader implications? How does the Tome of Shattered Veils fit into the landscape of psychological horror, and what does it tell us about our own fears of reality breaking apart? Let's dive into the story's themes and its place in the horror genre. The Tome of Shattered Veils isn't just a story about one man's descent, it's a meditation on universal fears, the fear of losing control, the fear of an unstable reality, and the fear that our minds can betray us. Let's explore the key themes that make this story a standout in psychological horror and how they connect to broader trends in the genre. Existential dread is the fear that life lacks meaning or that our existence is inherently unstable. In the Tome of Shattered Veils, this dread is literalized. The tome reveals that reality is a construct, held together by perception. When that perception falters, the world falls apart. This taps into a primal fear: what if everything we know is a lie? What if our reality is just a story we tell ourselves? This theme resonates with works like House of Leaves, where the house's impossible geometry reflects the character's existential crises, or The Truman Show, where reality is a staged illusion. But the Tome of Shattered Veils takes a more intimate approach, focusing on Elliot's personal struggle rather than a cosmic or societal framework. His dread isn't about the universe, it's about his own mind. To illustrate, consider a pivotal scene where Elliot finds a room in the library that shouldn't exist. The walls are covered in mirrors, each showing a different version of him, some laughing, some screaming, some blank. The room feels like a physical manifestation of his existential dread, a place where all versions of himself coexist and none are real. This scene isn't just creepy, it's a philosophical gut punch, forcing us to ask, which version of ourselves is the real one? Trauma is the heartbeat of the Tome of Shattered Veils. Elliot's grief over Clara's disappearance isn't just backstory, it's the engine of the horror. The tome uses his trauma to fuel the reality fractures, turning his memories into weapons. In one scene, he sees Clara in the library, but she's not a ghost, she's a projection of his guilt, accusing him of forgetting her. This is psychological horror at its finest. The enemy isn't an external monster, but the protagonist's own mind. This mirrors horror media like Silent Hill 2, where James's guilt manifests as monsters, or Hereditary, where familial trauma becomes a supernatural force. But the Tome of Shattered Veils stands out by keeping the horror internal. There are no monsters, no demons, just Elliot's fractured perception, amplified by the tome. Trauma is a common theme in horror, but it's rarely explored with this level of psychological depth. How do you think trauma shapes horror narratives? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you're finding this analysis compelling, consider supporting the channel through Patreon, link in the description. The tome itself is more than a MacGuffin, it's a symbol of how stories shape our reality. In the novel, it's described as a book that writes itself, adapting to the reader's fears and memories. For Elliot, it becomes a mirror of his psyche, reflecting his trauma and amplifying his doubts. This makes it a powerful metaphor for horror storytelling itself. Just as the tome rewrites Elliot's reality, horror stories rewrite our understanding of the world, forcing us to confront our deepest fears. This concept echoes works like The King in Yellow, where a play drives readers mad, or Dead Space's Marker, which manipulates perception. But the Tome of Shattered Veils is unique in its focus on personal, psychological horror rather than cosmic or supernatural terror. The tome doesn't need eldritch powers, it's terrifying because it knows Elliot better than he knows himself. The Tome of Shattered Veils, a psychological descent into a broken reality, is more than a horror story, it's a mirror held up to our own minds. Through Elliot Kane's journey, we're forced to confront the fragility of perception, the weight of trauma, and the terror of a reality that might not be as solid as we think. This story doesn't just scare us. It challenges us to question what we believe, what we remember, and who we are when the veils of reality start to tear. What makes this novel concept so powerful is its grounding in psychological truth. Dissociation, derealization, cognitive distortions, these aren't just plot devices, they're real experiences that millions grapple with. By weaving them into a horror narrative, the Tome of Shattered Veils gives voice to the silent terror of a fractured mind. It reminds us that the scariest monsters are the ones we carry inside us. Let's reflect on its place in horror. Like Silent Hill or House of Leaves, this story uses psychological horror to explore universal fears. But its focus on perception and consciousness sets it apart, offering a fresh take on what it means to lose reality. It's a story that lingers, not because of gore or jump scares, but because it forces us to ask, what would we do if our reality started to break? So, what do you think? Could you face a world where your perception is your only anchor, and it's starting to slip? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and let's keep this conversation going. If you enjoyed this deep dive, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell for more horror analysis. And if you want to support the channel, check out our Patreon for exclusive content and early access, link in the description. Thanks for joining me on this journey into the Tome of Shattered Veils. If you want more deep dives into psychological horror, check out our playlist on horror analysis, link in the description. And don't forget to share this video with your fellow horror fans. What's the next horror concept you want me to explore? Let me know below. Until then, stay curious, and stay afraid.